name is Dominik Mohilo. We're here at the Serverless Architecture Conference 2019 in Berlin. With me is Jonas Schweizer. He is the CTO and co-founder of Laserhub. You were speaking in your session about serverless for startups. We'll come to that in a second. But first of all, what is serverless for you personally?
I think it's two things. It's an abstraction layer on top of Lambdas. So we are in the AWS world, so I'm talking about Lambdas. So it's complete abstraction of anything what is necessary to run a Lambda, and it's power. So it empowers me as a developer to run application code without caring anything about infrastructure. It's a great tool, actually.
So startups, why should startups, in your opinion, bet on serverless?
I'm a bit bad in looking ahead in the big trends, but I see two different kinds of strategies. The one thing is all the containerized Kubernetes kind of microservice architectures that you just run application in different kind of setups on a cloud-based cluster. And the second part is a bit younger, is the serverless part. So in my opinion, a startup would do not good in just deciding on one of them. I think both of them have their use case. So they should have that on the list in terms of their IT and infrastructure strategy. Besides that, I also talked about this in the talk, is developers love to adopt new technologies. And for a company, the CTO, or let's say the engineering team in general, they should have a feeling for what's going on, and that's why I think they should invest time in understanding what the technology is capable of and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. So that's overall a positive outlook. So are there companies or situations where serverless is just not working?
Yeah, I think currently the limits are mainly within the Lambda functions. So the size of your application, your payloads, concurrency limits. So these are limits that Lambdas have. And as serverless is an abstraction layer on top of that, they can't, change the world behind it. So there are limits in terms of the use case on that end. On the other hand side, for us, main area of investigation is still developer experience. So that how is the local environment and the combination, for a developer, how do I develop and debug my code locally and remotely? I think it's not yet that sophisticated as in other areas. I talked before, so there will be limits where you see, oh damn, maybe this very, very important service that we're running here should be built on a bit more sophisticated stuff. But to be honest, the time is rushing. Serverless will not go away. So it's more or less deciding on the use case, what to do with which kind of technology.
Mm-hmm. Based on that, adopting serverless is not an easy task, and adapting it right is even harder. Are there any best practices or tips or tricks you can share to include it?
Yeah, so maybe there are three different types of target groups. The one are the hobby developers that want to try it. The other ones are small companies or startups, and the last ones are corporates. I just had a talk with somebody from a huge corporate. They also are researching on serverless. That's why actually they're here on the conference. So I think the main difference is that, or the main best practice is, we are capable of making the use case small and the scope small. And that by this adopting serverless is easy. It's not that hard. It's just making the scope small and then iterate over time. And that's what our culture is about. So we don't want to have the full-blown solution, the 120% solution thought of and then build it within 6 months. We want to have a value after 2 or 4 weeks. That's our effort, that's our objectives. And that's how we build everything. So infrastructure should actually follow that kind of thing, and thinking and culture. And so best practice is come up with a small use case. I'll give you an example. So we have migrated one use case to serverless, but we did not actually completely migrate the whole application logic. So we have this integration pattern which pushes to a message queue. It's just very, very, very limited. And in the end, our normal application still runs in the back. We could have moved the whole application code that runs on top of that, but that would have required a complete refactoring. So we would have to carve out the application logic, bring it to serverless, bring it live. I think it will be the next step. But while we are making learnings on that, we can think ahead, does it make sense or not? And if we would have done the last part, I think we would never have had the learnings after 2 or 4 weeks. Would be absolutely impossible. So for a small company, startup-like company, small use case, direct value, and go for it.
Mm-hmm. So as a last question, can you give a little outlook on how serverless will evolve in the next or in the coming years?
Yeah, so there's infrastructure as code, namely in all the kind of things around Terraform. Then there is Kubernetes as one abstraction layer on top of infrastructure and compute. Serverless now comes along the way, a new citizen in town. I would actually say serverless will try to find its niche, I'm quite sure actually, because of what I felt from it. It was just amazing experience. But it needs to invest in, if it has developers as its target group and not like the IT administration department, I would say, it has to invest in developer experience heavily to really understand what a developer needs in his day-to-day tasks. I think that is the hopefully main involvement in that area.
Okay, then thanks Jonas. And
thank you.
Thanks for watching.